With his potatoes. So today we have two more potatoes with me, Snorlax and Dory, and together we are going to decode the science of memory. Over to you, Dory.
So, hello everyone, I'll be talking about memory. So, every day we meet and interact with a number of people, do different chores, and learn and experience new things. And our mind has the capability to remember them and repeat these processes. So, what is the factor that helps us understand and retrieve them? The answer to this is our memory. So, in simple terms, memory refers to the ability to remember things. It refers to the store of information that is necessary for the performance of many cognitive tasks. Now, in recent decades, memory has become one of the principal pillars of a new branch of science that represents a relation between cognitive psychology and neuroscience known as cognitive neuroscience. So, these are the contents. Introduction. So, Henry Molaison, widely known as HM, was an American man who had bilateral medical temporal lobectomy to surgically resect the anterior two-thirds of his hippocampi, parahippocampal cortices, entorhinal cortices, piriform cortices, and amygdala in an attempt to cure his epilepsy. Although the surgery was partially successful in controlling his epilepsy, a severe side effect was that he became unable to form new memories. And because of this, scientists found out that the hippocampus plays a big part in the formation and retention of certain kinds of memory. Now, after his death, his brain was donated to science for researchers to examine his brain more closely. His brain was removed and flash frozen before being cut into 2401 microsections. Now, these are some of the foods which improve our memory. So, coming to the stages of memory processing, now from an information processing perspective, there are three main stages involved in the formation and retrieval of memory. So, the first stage is encoding, and in this stage, there is the processing and combining of the received information. The second stage is storage, and it involves the creation of a permanent record of the encoded information. Now, the third and the final stage is retrieval or recall, and this retrieval is a process of calling back the stored information in response to some cue for use in some process or activity. Memory traces. So, memories are stored in the brain by changing the basic sensitivity of the synaptic transmission between the neurons as a result of the previous neural activity. Now, these new or facilitated pathways are called as memory traces. And these are very important because once the traces are established, they can be selectively activated by the thinking mind to reproduce the memories. Moving on to the classification of memory, a basic and generally accepted classification of memory is based on the duration of memory retention, and it identifies three main types of memory. So the first type is sensory memory, and this sensory memory acts as a buffer for the stimuli through our senses. It usually lasts for only 300 milliseconds, but it has unlimited capacity. Now it corresponds to the initial moment that an item is perceived. Hence, the information is passed from the sensory memory into the short-term memory. We have the haptic memory for touch, we have echoic memory for oral, iconic memory for visual images, olfactory memory for smell, and gustatory memory for taste.
Tori, can you tell why smell or olfactory memory is a very strong memory?
Yeah, there is a difference between the way your body handles sight, sound, taste, and touch, and the way it perceives smell. So, all of these other senses are routed through the thalamus to the appropriate processing sensors. But the smell bypasses all of that, and they are detected by the receptors in your nose. And these signals then head straight to the olfactory bulbs. Because of this, the olfactory memory or the smell is stronger than the other senses. Now moving on to short-term memory. So short-term memory acts as a scratch pad for the temporary recall of information under process. This short-term memory is typified by one's memory of 7 to 10 numerals in a telephone number for a few seconds to a few minutes, but lasting only as long as the person continues to think about these numbers or facts. Hence, the short-term memory decays rapidly and it also has a limited capacity. Now, chunking of information can lead to increase in the short-term memory capacity. And this is the reason why remembering this list of hyphenated phone numbers is easier than remembering this list of single long numbers. And this successful formation of a chunk is called as a closure. Now, interference often causes disturbance in short-term memory retention. Hence, this accounts for the desire to complete a task held in short-term memory as soon as possible. Now, there are three basic operations of short-term memory. Iconic memory, which is the ability to hold visual images, acoustic memory, which is the ability to hold sounds, and working memory. So this working memory is an active process to keep the information until it is put to use. It is usually referred to as the short-term store, which is needed for the performance of certain mental tasks. Hence, it is not defined in terms of duration, but rather in terms of purpose. For example, when we are mentally asked to multiply 45 into 4, we need to perform a series of calculations to arrive at the final answer. And this ability to store the information regarding the instructions and the intermediate result is what is referred to as the working memory. So now coming to intermediate long-term memory. So these may last for many minutes or even weeks, but they will be lost unless the memory traces are activated enough to become more permanent. And once they become permanent, they are referred to as the long-term memory. Hence, this brings us to the fourth and final type of memory, which is long-term memory. And as the name itself suggests, it is used for the storage of information over a long time. And unlike short-term memory, it has a little decay. Now, there is an enhanced response at the synapse within the hippocampus, and this response is referred to as the long-term potential, which is very essential for the formation of memory traces. Now, long-term memory can generally be divided into two broad categories, declarative memory and non-declarative memory. So, coming to the first type, which is declarative memory, it is also referred to as explicit memory, and in humans, these declarative memories are associated with the conscious recollection of facts and events. It is further subdivided into two categories: semantic memory, which encompasses the memory for facts and concepts, and episodic memory, which is also referred to as the autobiographical memory. This episodic memory represents our memory of events and experiences in a serial form. Now coming to non-declarative type of memory, so it is also referred to as implicit memory and it operates at an unconscious level. It usually encompasses the memory for our skills and habits.
So Dory, there are some memories like memory of a birthday or an important thing that we remember more. Which type of memory is that?
Yeah, memory of all our events such as our birthdays or the New Year celebration, all such things come under episodic memory.
Dory, I love to dance, swim, and play cricket. Could you tell me which type of memory is that?
Yeah, all such motor things such as cycling, dancing, swimming, all of these come under the non-declarative type of memory, which is procedural memory.
Dory, so we all know that Bengaluru is the capital of Karnataka. So these type of facts, which memory does that come in?
Yeah, these types of facts and concepts fall under the semantic memory.
Dory, how is possible that phone number or address of our friends or family, we can remember it easily?
Yeah, these type of phone numbers and addresses which we have to remember immediately, they fall under short-term memory.
Okay, and Dory, so sometimes when I, even though if I don't go to my grandmother's place, but then if when I smell the smell of baking and all that, what she does, it brings back the whole memory of the whole place and all the house and everything. So, which memory does that come in?
Yeah, since this is associated with the sense, which is smell, it falls under sensory memory. Now, there are three main activities that are related to long-term memory: storage, retrieval, and deletion. Now, information from the short-term memory is stored in the long-term memory by rehearsal. That is, the repeated exposure to a stimulus or rehearsal of the piece of information transfers it into long-term memory. Now, experiments also suggest that learning is most effective if it is distributed over time, and deletion is mainly caused due to decay and interference. However, emotional factors can also affect the long-term memory. Now, it is debatable whether we actually forget anything or whether it just becomes increasingly difficult for us to retrieve it. Now, information may not be recalled sometimes, but it may be recognized, or sometimes information can be recalled only by prompting. Hence, this leads us to the third operation of memory, which is information retrieval. Now, there are two types of information retrieval: recall and recognition. So, in recall, the information is reproduced from the memory, and in recognition, the presentation of the information provides the knowledge that the information has been seen before. Hence, recognition is of lesser complexity than recollection. However, this process of recall can also be associated with the provision of retrieval cues, which enables the subject to quickly assess the information in the memory. Now, coming to the structural changes during the formation of long-term memory. So, the synapses physically restructure themselves in a way that changes their sensitivity for transmitting in the nervous signals during the formation of these long-term memory traces. Some of these changes are: there is an increase in the vesicle release site for the secretion of transmitter substance. There is an increase in the number of transmitter vesicles released. There is an increase in the number of presynaptic terminals, and changes in the structure of dendritic spines that permit the transmission of stronger signals can also be seen. Coming to development of memory. So, the development of memory in children becomes evident within the first 2 to 3 years of a child's life, as they show considerable advances in the declarative memory. And this enhancement continues into adolescence with major developments in short-term memory, working memory, long-term memory, as well as autobiographical memory. But the recent research on development of memory has indicated that declarative memory or explicit memory may exist in infants who are even younger than 2 years old. For example, newborns who are less than 3 days old demonstrate a clear preference for their mother's own voice. Coming to consolidation of memory. So, for a short-term memory to be converted into long-term memory, which can be recalled weeks or even years later, it must become consolidated. That is, this short-term memory, when activated repeatedly, will initiate a chemical, physical, and anatomical change in the synapse that is responsible for the long-term type of memory. And this process usually requires 5 to 10 minutes for minimal consolidation, whereas it requires an hour or more for strong consolidation. Now, brain concussion, sudden application of deep general anesthesia, or any other effect that temporarily blocks the dynamic functioning of the brain can prevent consolidation. Now, as we know, rehearsal enhances the degree of transfer of short-term memory into long-term memory. Also, our brain has a natural tendency to rehearse the newfound information. This explains why small amount of information which is studied in depth can be remembered far better than large amounts of information which is studied only superficially. It also explains why a person who is wide awake can consolidate memories far better than a person who is in a state of mental fatigue.
Dori, how does drug influence consolidation of memory?
Yeah, certain drugs such as anti-anxiety drugs, anti-seizure drugs, and antidepressant drugs affect the cortical and cerebellar areas. They also have a profound effect on the hippocampus, thereby hampering the memory formation as well as memory retrieval processes. So now coming to the formation processing of new memories. So one of the most important features of consolidation is that new memories are codified into different classes of information. During this process, the old memories are pulled out from our memory storage bins and are used to help process the new information. These old and new memories are compared for their similarities and differences. Thus, during consolidation, the new memories are not stored randomly in the brain, but they are stored in direct association with other memories of the same type. Coming to emotion and memory, so heightened emotions can lead to the experiences crystallizing into long lasting and vivid memories. One such example is the flashbacks of the post traumatic stress disorder. This boost in memory formation is partially due to the effect of the stress hormone norepinephrine. It appears that this hormone affects a receptor molecule called glutamate receptor 1 on the nerve cell surfaces. The action appears to be that norepinephrine, which is a form of adrenaline, triggers the attachment of a phosphate group to the glutamate receptor 1, and this added phosphate group enhances the movement of glutamate receptor 1 to the surfaces where they help cells to form new memories. Now, coming to memory and aging. So, memory loss is a normal physiological process that approximately starts at the age of 45. The brain's sharpness and the power of reasoning are lost with time. The ability to encode new memories of events or facts and working memory also show a decline in normal aging. And these deficits may be related to impairments seen in the ability to refresh the recently processed information. Coming to memory disorders. So, memory disorders are defined as suppressed cognition abilities leading to the deteriorated ability of reasoning and decision making. Much of the current knowledge has come from studying memory disorders such as amnesia, under that retrograde amnesia and anterograde amnesia. Retrograde amnesia is the inability to recollect past information, whereas anterograde amnesia is the inability to form new memories. Dementia, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, agnosia, encephalopathy, etc.
Dory, does plants have memory?
When it comes to memory in case of plant, it can't be defined as recall or retrieval. Instead, it can be explained as familiarism. For example, when a plant is exposed to certain stressful conditions and that time it adapts to these conditions. Hence, when the plant is exposed to these stressful conditions again, it may be it may be able to tolerate these conditions and respond to it in a better way. Hence, the memory in plant can be concluded as a non-centralized process. Moving on to conclusion. So, despite the enormous amount of data available, our understanding of memory, its complex neural organization, and its functioning is far from complete, as is our ability to deal with many of its pathologies, as mentioned in the previous slides, due to which memory disorders are a serious problem. So, one can prevent memory disorders by adopting some changes in lifestyle, such as improving diet, having some good sleep, doing a proper workout, having healthy interactions with people around, etc. Thank you all.
That was amazing, Dory. Thank you so much. And if you like this video, consider subscribing and click on the like button. It will inspire us to create more. And all the references used for this video has been linked in the description for your reference. And so we conclude by saying that we all have to sleep to remember. Thank you.